A very good day to all the participants and the committees of Pitch Conference 2023. My name is Michelina David and I'm from UITM Kota Kinabalu, Sabah. Today I would like to present our study on the domestic travelers in Malaysia and their intention to travel to Sabah post COVID-19 travel restrictions. The authors of this paper is myself, along with Dr. Tanya Maria Tangit and Dr. Spencer Hedley Mogindo. And these are the topics that I will be presenting for today's presentation. As we all know, the tourism industry plays a vital role in the economy and in the international trade as acknowledged by the United Nations World Tourism Organization. However, the COVID-19 pandemic in 2019 had severe impact on various industries worldwide, particularly the tourism sector. This impact was observed globally, including in our country, Malaysia. For example, the domestic tourist arrivals in Malaysia has declined from 131.7 million in 2020 to only 66 million in 2021. Meanwhile, in Sabah, it has also dropped from 10.3 million to only 3.8 million during the same period. Because of this, the Malaysian government has implemented various forms of measures, including the Movement Control Order and National Recovery Plan, in order to control the spread of the virus. As the COVID-19 cases decrease, a transition towards the endemic phase was declared, allowing for relaxations of SOPs and gradual reopening of travel. However, traveling post-pandemic might not be the same as traveling pre-pandemic, as the COVID-19 pandemic might have affected the traveler's travel behavior and perception about traveling. There are a lot of studies that have explored the influence of COVID-19 on travel intentions, but most of it have focused on other countries, for example, in Vietnam, China, India, Indonesia, and many more. Despite extensive research on COVID-19's impact on travel behavior and travel intention, a gap remains in understanding how it affects travel intentions, particularly for the domestic travelers in Malaysia and their intention to visit Sabah post COVID-19 travel restrictions. This gap could make it harder for the Malaysian tourism stakeholders to adjust their business according to the changed travel behavior and travel habits due to the pandemic. Other than that, most existing studies often use the theory of planned behavior but did not incorporate variables such as fear of COVID-19, travel anxiety, and risk attitude. Addressing this, our research aimed to extend the TPP model by incorporating variables to assess their roles in the domestic traveler's intention to visit Sabah post COVID-19 travel restrictions. Therefore, these are the research objectives that this study are focusing on, which are to determine the influence of these variables towards the domestic traveler's intention to travel to Sabah post COVID-19 travel restrictions. The theory of planned behavior, or also known as TPB, is an expansion of the theory of reason action TRA, which is frequently employed in the field of tourism research to comprehend how travelers perceive situations and forecast their actions based on their attitudes and convictions. However, there are past studies that have proposed the necessity for more research to employ the TPB model with various variables connected to tourism, especially in the context of the pandemic. Hence, this study aimed to modify the TPP model and expand it by incorporating new variables such as fear of COVID-19, travel anxiety, and risk attitude. The objective of the study to illustrate how these variables, in conjunction with the TPP model, can shape the intention of travelers to visit Sabah post COVID-19 travel restrictions. Therefore, this is the theoretical framework for this particular study. Fear of COVID-19, travel anxiety, and risk attitude are the new variables. Meanwhile, perceived behavior control and subjective norms are the variables from theory of planned behavior. And intention to travel to Sabah post COVID-19 travel restrictions will be the dependent variable for this particular study. The study used a quantitative approach and conducted a cross-sectional survey to gather data. The target population was on the domestic travelers in Malaysia that have intention to travel to Sabah post-COVID-19 travel restrictions. In addition to that, for this study, the non-probability sampling was chosen due to the lack of a population sampling frame and the need for quick data collection. And purposive sampling was utilized to represent the intended population for this study. Furthermore, the GPower software was used to determine the appropriate minimum sample size. The analysis suggested a minimum sample size of 85 participants. However, according to the previous scholars, for conducting a multiple regression analysis, a more suitable sample size falls within the range of 200 to 300 respondents. Therefore, the aim of the study was to collect respondents, a total of 300 participants. The questionnaire was adapted from previous research with minor changes, and it was in the form of both English and Bahasa Malaysia language. And the survey was distributed using social media in Google Form. The official survey managed to gather around 303 respondents, which was aligned with previous studies recommending 300 respondents. As seen on the slide, most of the respondents were female with 54.1%, and most of the respondents are ranging from the age of 22 to 30 years old. Most of the respondents are identified as single. Moreover, most of the respondents chose to have a university education background with 72.9%. In terms of employment, more than a quarter of the respondents were students, followed by government workers. And also, most of the respondents are from Sarawak, followed by Wilayah Persekutuan Labuan. This section discusses the variables descriptive analysis, which includes their standard deviation and mean value. The analysis was carried out by using SPSS software, and as seen on the slide, for the variable of fear of COVID-19, the item number 3 had the highest mean value. Meanwhile, for travel anxiety, the highest average value was found in item number 1. In terms of risk attitude, item number 1 exhibited the highest mean value. And for subjective norms, item number 4 had the highest average values. For the perceived behavior control, item number 4 showed the highest average. And lastly, for travel intention, the item number 3 has the highest value of mean. For this slide, it displays the outcomes of the analysis done on the reflective measurement model, which was analyzed by using the partial least square software. Among the variables, travel intention exhibits the highest value of Cronbach alpha. On the other hand, risk attitude records the lowest value of Cronbach alpha with 0.737, which is still considered satisfactory. These findings are consistent with what other researchers have stated regarding on the value of Cronbach alphas, which is zero point 0.7 to zero point 0.9, are considered good to excellent. For the reflective measurement model, the variables indicator reliability are also analyzed. It refers to how much of an indicator's characteristics can be attributed to the underlying factor it represents. To ensure reliability, it is generally recommended that the indicator loading for each variable exceeds the value of zero point 0.7. If any of the autoloadings fall below the suggested value, it is important to remove that item as it could affect the average variance extracted and composite reliability values. In this case, risk attitude item number 3 scored only 0.495, which is below the recommended value and was removed. After excluding the item number 3 of risk attitude, the test was reassessed and the outcomes of the loading analysis revealed that all the measurements items were clearly linked to their intended underlying variables. The revised results demonstrate that the values of all the items align with the substantial loadings as supported by previous studies. The assessment of relationship between variables represented by path coefficients and is done through t-values which is obtained from bootstrapping. In the slide, most of the path analysis p-values range from very significant to highly significant, except for hypothesis 1 and hypothesis 5, which have p-values exceeding 0.05. Thus, these hypotheses are rejected as they do not meet the required value. The study's objective was to understand how variables like fear of COVID 19, travel anxiety, perceived behavior control, subjective norms, and risk attitude are able to impact travelers' intention to visit Sabah post COVID 19 travel restrictions. The findings show that COVID 19 affected people's well being in different ways. Past research showed that fear of COVID 19 made people afraid and less likely to travel. However, our study found the opposite. Even though people were scared, they still planned to travel to Sabah after the restrictions were lifted. Meanwhile, for travel anxiety, it did influence people's travel intentions negatively, which aligned with previous studies. This shows that the pandemic has made travelers more anxious to travel to Sabah even after the travel restrictions has been revoked. This is due to the anxiety of them getting infected and getting infecting other people during their travels. Furthermore, this study shows that perceived behavior control have a positive relationship with travelers' intention to travel to Sabah post COVID-19 travel restrictions. Study shows that during the pandemic, people felt they had control over their plans and necessary resources, which makes more likely they want to travel. In terms of subjective norms, close individuals such as family and friends' excitement also had positive impact on the traveler's travel intention, which aligns with other research, which shows that travelers are easily influenced by their loved ones when deciding to travel post pandemic. For risk attitude, the finding of this study shows that the traveler's willingness to take risks had a big influence on travel intention. Despite the pandemic, travelers still had a strong desire to travel, indicating their readiness to take some risks while also following safety measures such as hand washing, practicing safety, social distancing, and wearing face masks. The study's results can help for both literature and managerial perspective, whereby literature perspective it will be able to give the body of knowledge new information regarding on the changes of travel behavior and how the extension model of TPB with additional variables could affect the traveler's travel intention, which can be used for future research. Meanwhile, for managerial perspectives such as travel industries and the government, it can help them to make new travel policies and travel strategies that can make travelers feel more safer and confident when they travel to Sabah after the COVID-19 pandemic, which is important because safety is crucial, especially traveling after the COVID-19 pandemic, which was mentioned by Dr. Mazlin Mokhtar at the World Tourism Conference in 2022. Finishing the study revealed several limitations. One of the limitations was the process of gathering the respondents. Despite splitting the survey to travel focus groups on platforms such as Facebook, it's possible that some potential respondents may have overlooked the survey post, contributing to a prolonged data collection phase. Furthermore, the constant changes of the COVID 19 information and regulation was an additional challenge as it could impact the research progress requiring constant adjustment along the way. For future research, researchers can focus more on other variables that might affect people's plan to travel, such as financial, accessibility, and convenience. Other than that, using different theories such as the protection motivation theory could give a better understanding of what motivates people to travel after COVID 19. In addition to that, since it is known that the pandemic has made some individuals feel stressed and depressed, future research could focus more about how the pandemic has affected people's well-being in the long term and could suggest ways to cope with these negative effects. It is also recommended to study international travelers to visit Sabah, as this could help broaden the body of knowledge on the perceptions by the international travelers to travel to Sabah post COVID 19 travel restrictions. Apart from that, understanding the perception from international as well as domestic travelers would be able to guide travel companies and the Malaysian government to create travel strategies, promotions, and even travel policies that matches the travelers' current travel perceptions after the pandemic. For example, probably offering private travel options or focusing more on sustainable travel. In summary, the study explored how different variables influence the desire of Malaysian travelers to travel to Sabah post COVID 19 travel restrictions. The focus was on how fear of COVID 19, travel anxiety, perceived behavior control, risk attitude, and subjective norms could affect travelers' intention to travel. The findings indicate that the pandemic has indeed affected people's intention, making them more cautious and attentive to safety measures against COVID 19 transmission. However, despite feeling anxious and fearful, travelers still have a strong intention to visit Sabah once the travel restrictions are lifted. It is important to highlight that travelers are also have also understand the importance of following safety practices. Overall, this study effectively answered the research objectives about the impact of the variables towards the Malaysian travelers and their intention to travel to Sabah post COVID 19 travel restrictions. That is the end of the presentation. Thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me using the contact details below. Thank you and have a nice day.